monumental heights as we move forward. I want to thank you for the opportunity to work with this community and to engage in doing wonderful things for our students and for their futures. I am so thankful for you. MPS is rising.
Greetings from the Office of Student Support Services. I am Davita Hines.
I am Jacqueline Jackson.
I am Isaiah Pinkston.
I'm Keon Addison, and we are the District Resource Officers of Montgomery Public Schools. We would like to welcome you to the 2022-2023 academic school year.
September is National Attendance Awareness Month, and we want to share with you some important facts. First, the state of Alabama requires all children between the ages of 6 to 17 to attend school.
Parents, you are required to submit a written excuse each day your child is absent. And be mindful, Montgomery Public Schools do not accept excuses via fax or email. Also, parental excuses are limited to 8 days.
Finally, if your child has a chronic illness, please contact the school your child attends for additional guidance. Now, here are a couple of proactive tips to help your child's attendance.
Parents, establish a nightly and morning routine to prepare your child for school daily and create a working relationship with your child's teacher.
Students, wake up early to ensure that you are present and on time for school. Also, don't forget to turn in your excuses.
Parents, if you have any questions or concerns, please refer to your 2022-2023 Student Handbook and feel free to call the Office of Student Support at 334-223-6850. Students, remember, stay connected, keep learning.
Greetings from the Office.
Montgomery is rising. Hi, I'm Dr. Melvin J. Brown, Superintendent of Montgomery Public Schools. It is indeed my pleasure to serve the children and the community of Montgomery. As we prepare for a new school year, I'm looking forward to engaging with everyone in every space possible. In the coming days, we'll be announcing the details of my 100-day entry plan for MPS. As we launch this plan, I look forward to listening and learning as much as possible so we can ensure that we gather as much perspective as we can to help build a stronger school district. My goals include establishing 21st century-oriented academic excellence, ensuring safe and secure schools, being committed to fiscal accountability, and creating classroom spaces to allow children to feel connectedness, belonging, and support. Your engagement and feedback are crucial to the success of our students and their futures. Montgomery, let's get to work together to reach our goals. MPS is on the rise, and I know our academic success will reach monumental heights as we move forward. I want to thank you for the opportunity to work with this community and to engage in doing wonderful things for our students and for their futures. I am so thankful for you. MPS is rising.
Okay. Let me have the budget book. Okay. I'm going to ask the public if they can refer to the budget book. And I'm going to kind of have to thumb through this book while talking at the same time. Of course, in putting together our budget process is, of course, interactive and inclusive. We talk with numerous department heads, numerous stakeholders throughout Montgomery County to get input related to the budget. We also speak with board members, various principals, teachers, classified support employees in the effort to get as much input as we could. We also go out and speak to groups. In fact, Dr. Brown went out and spoke with numerous civic leaders, the Boys Club, and just a number of leaders to get some input as to what for the upcoming fiscal year. And of course, while we do encourage input from the public, there are also some things that we have to keep in mind. We have to keep in mind budget constraints. And of course, with the state of our economy, we really don't know exactly what is going to happen. We just want to be mindful of the amounts of monies that we have allocated for expenditures. We also have to keep in mind the various legal entities, whether it's the U.S. Department of Education, the state legislature, or the U.S. Department of Education. Some funds also require matching allocations. For example, we'll receive about $150 million from the state's foundation program, but in order to receive those funds, we'll be required to put up about $27 million of our own tax revenues. So the state is basically saying, okay, Montgomery, we're going to provide you over $150 million for education. But please understand that education is also the responsibility of the local community. Therefore, you'll have to put up some of your tax revenues to do the same. Next slide, please. And there we see the local match for the foundation program, where we'll have to put up almost $28 million to participate in the state's foundation program. We'll also receive about $7 to $8 million in state capital purchase funds. And of course, in order to participate in the state's capital purchase funding source, we will have to put up of our own tax revenues almost $1.8 million of our own funds. Next slide, please. Of course, we had several financial highlights. I'm not going to read all of these things, but one of the things the finance department has tried to do was implement more of a technology scenario in our collecting of funds. We've tried to be a little bit more convenient for parents and the community. That is why we institute a program called My School Bucks. We also, just a few months ago, implemented another electronic process where parents can go out to various athletic events, purchase their snacks, and pay for those snacks cashless. So there's an opportunity for parents to not even have to first come to the school when they have to pay fees, and if they are at athletic events, then they'll be able to pay for the snacks or pay for the Coke or whatever without having cash. And the money goes directly to the school's bank account. Next slide, please. And there are just a few other financial highlights for fiscal year 2023. I do want to just say that last year, we provided all bus drivers an additional 13.5% raise. I also provided many of our support staff an additional 10% raise. And of course, this year, for fiscal year 2023, there will be a 4% raise for all employees, at least a 4% raise for all employees. And of course, this is a state mandated raise. And there will be some teachers, based on their years of experience, that would get up to 20 to 21% increase in salaries. So we're very glad to see that the state has been very, very proactive over the last few years in making sure that the state of Alabama is becoming more competitive with teacher salaries. We also updated our academic and athletic salary supplement schedule over the last year. And that has been very beneficial in allowing us to retain really, really good coaches, because, you know, before, I mean, we get good coaches, we train them up, and the next thing you know, another district come along and kind of offer those coaches some additional benefits. Same thing with some of our academic leaders. We were able to update an academic supplement for clubs and so forth. And just to give you an example of that, this year we have budgeted for athletics over almost $3.4 million in athletic supplements and benefits. In 2019, our last full year before COVID, we expended $1.9 million. So in 2019, we expended $1.9 million. This year for 2023, we have budgeted almost $3.4 million for athletic supplements. Also, academic supplements for clubs, whether it's the robotics club, whether it's the scholars or the forensics or our law team and various other academic clubs. In 2019, we spent $117,000 for academic supplements. We have budgeted for 2023 almost $1 million for academic supplements. That's over 8 times what we expended in 2019, the last full year of an academic year before COVID. So we are investing in our children. We're investing in our children both mainly academically because we said over 8 times what we budgeted the prior year and over 1.5 times the athletics from what we budgeted the last full fiscal year. Next slide, please. Of course, as with you have benefits, you also have various challenges. And of course, we see some of the challenges that we're faced with. And of course, we intend to take on these challenges head on. Of course, one of the major challenges, of course, is our decline in student population. I think our superintendent and his team is already putting in some excellent programs to address some of those things. We also are very, very mindful that we have ESSER funds, ESSER ARP funds, and these are one-time funds. So we are preparing ourselves beyond fiscal year 2024 when the ESSER and ARP funds will be gone. Next slide, please. Of course, we see our decline in student population over the last several years, and we'll just see that we're projected to be funded based on almost 26,000 students for fiscal year 2024, comparable to 26,381 students for 2023. But again, we do have a plan to continue to do everything we could to stabilize our student population. Next slide, please. Of course, our district operates on 5 financial funds. First, there is the general fund. The general fund basically accounts for all of our state and local revenues. I spoke earlier about the state foundation program, in which we project to receive over $150 million. Those are state dollars, but also our local dollars, which are mainly our local tax revenues. I talked about the local match, but that's coming from our local tax base, whether it's our property taxes or sales taxes. Special revenue fund is basically our federal program funds. And of course, because we're receiving our ARP and ESSER dollars, our federal program dollars are a little higher this year and for next year than it would be in any traditional year. But again, I think it's important that we are mindful that those funds end in 2024. Capital projects fund are basically funds that account for renovations of our schools. Of course, we have to renovate, build, and do various repairs, major repairs to our schools. So that would be capital projects funds. Debt service fund is the payment of long-term debt. We do have a few bonds that we're still paying. We project that most of those bonds will be paid off by fiscal year 2025. Fiduciary funds are non-public local school funds. And of course, fiduciary funds would be more like your clubs, whether it's the SGA club or the science club or the arts club. Those are club dollars. You also have some local school funds called public school funds. These are dollars that are raised at the local school. However, the public school funds, which are in special revenue, they are funds that kind of benefit the entire school, such as school concessions. Those dollars would benefit the entire school. Next slide, please. And there we see our total annual operating budget for fiscal year 2023. We will notice that our general fund, which are basically our state and local revenues, account for about $241 million. We see our special revenue funds account for about $134 million. Of course, we see federal sources at $130 million. Of course, the majority of that are those ESSER ARP dollars that will be going away. Usually our federal sources funds for special revenue really run around $50 to $60 million a year, and of course we see $130 million for 2023. Debt service fund, about $4.7 million, the payment of long-term debt. That's those bonds I'm speaking of, in which we believe that most of them will be paid off by 2025. Capital projects fund, about $83 million. Of course, we receive some funds from the state capital purchase dollars, and of course the state did issue a bond issue about a year or two ago, in which Montgomery received about $33 million. Of course, we see the $65 million. These are dollars that were derived from our letting of bonds from the property tax that was passed in 2020. The expendable trust fund, those are basically our public school funds, whether it's the SGA club, those are basically those club funds. But we see a total of revenues of about $463 million. Total expenditures about $464 million. Now I'll break that down a little bit later. Next slide, please. And there again, we see our total revenues. We see our general fund makes up the larger portions of all of our funds, which include both our state revenues and our local revenues. We see our special revenue funds of about $134 million, mainly our federal dollars, which includes those ARP or ESSER funds, along with our special ed funds, our Title I funds, Title II, and various other federal dollars. Debt service fund, of course, the payment of long-term debt, almost $5 million. Capital projects, the building renovation of schools, about $83 million. In our fiduciary or club funds, about $376,000. Next slide, please. First, I'd like to talk about the general fund. First, I would just like to point out that we're projecting revenues of $241 million, expenditures about $236 million, and we're expecting revenues to exceed expenditures at about $4.5 million. We believe we'll have a beginning fund balance around $72.5 million, and we'll end fiscal year 2023 with about $77 million. However, within that $77 million, there are a few recommendations that we would like to make that I will get into just a little later. Next slide, please. And there we see a breakdown of our general fund. First, there's the state revenues. Those are basically our foundation program funds, which is the largest share of state revenues, where we'll receive about $150 million. We'll also receive state transportation funds at almost $10 million. Then there's at-risk funds and some other state funds. Federal funds, in the general fund, we get a little small amount of federal dollars for general fund, mainly ROTC. And of course, we have a ROTC program at our 5 traditional schools. I think we also have one here at Carver. I don't know whether it's the Army or Marines or which one, but we do have ROTC programs at all of our traditional high schools. And these monies kind of lend itself to help us pay the salary and benefits of some of those military personnel, whom we are very, very thankful to. Local revenues are basically our local taxes, whether it's our local property taxes or local sales taxes. but these are basically our local dollars. Again, let's keep in mind that out of these local revenues, we will be required to put up about $28 million of matching dollars for the foundation program. We'll also have to put up over $1.7 million to participate in the state capital purchase program. Other revenues and fund sources are basically what is called indirect costs. These are revenues where our general fund access a small percentage fee to our federal programs in order to administer those particular programs. So it's just a small administrative fee charged to the federal programs in order to administer those federal programs. Next slide, please. And there we see a pie chart of our total general fund revenues. And let's note that we see that state revenues make up about 71.6% of our total general fund revenues. We notice that our local revenues make up about 25.8% of our total general fund revenues. And of course, I continue to say this, that this basically say to me is that we are too dependent on state revenues. Of course, with the new property tax that we'll begin collecting in 2024, that will help out a lot. But I also want you to see how that compares to other districts with similar demographics as Montgomery. Next slide, please. And there we see our 2023 local revenues compared to both Huntsville and Birmingham. And let's note that our local revenues compared to Birmingham's local revenues, Birmingham's about 45%, ours about 25%. We notice Huntsville at about 44%, ours again at about 25.8%. So we see that those school districts have done an excellent job of supporting their schools from a local standpoint. Again, we're very, very happy that the property tax bill passed, and we'll begin collecting those funds in 2024. But we see how far we were behind and how we were not able to offer our students the opportunities that they deserve. You also note that in Birmingham, about 55% of their total revenues are state revenues compared to our 71.6%. We notice that Huntsville state revenues at about 54% compared to our 71%. Again, this to me shows that we are too dependent on state revenues. Next slide, please. After we start receiving those ad valorem taxes, we kind of updated this chart to kind of have a fair comparison as of 2024 when we began receiving these ad valorem taxes. And we note that our local revenues increased from 60-some million to $95 million. We're projecting that our local revenues will increase by about $33 million in local taxes because of the public's willingness to support this school district. And again, we want to thank you, public, for coming out and voting for the increase in property taxes. It's very, very meaningful for this school district. And we see that after we start receiving those dollars, that our local revenue percentage is about $34.7 million. Again, compared to Birmingham, 45%, and compared to Huntsville, 44%. I will also just point out that our numbers are based on fiscal year 2023 budget. Those numbers for Birmingham and Huntsville was based on 2022 numbers. At the time, they did not have those numbers available on their website, so we had to go with their 2022 numbers. Since then, since last week, Birmingham has updated their 2023 numbers. And I would say to you that Birmingham's local tax revenues now is about $106 to $107 million. So it is beyond that $102 million that was reported in 2022. So of course that would increase their percentage of local revenues. Huntsville's, that number still was not available. Next slide, please. Of course, as I stated, the largest source of funds is our state funds. The foundation program funds makes up the total the largest share of the state funds, and we see that districts that provide more local support outside of the state funds, the things that they are able to do, to employ more locally funded teacher units and to enhance learning opportunities for our students. Next slide, please. Of course, we see our change in the foundation program funds. We note that our schools were funded based on 26,381 students for 2023. Of course, we see that was a loss of students, which equated to a loss of teacher units. We also know that anytime we lose teacher units, we lose dollars. So if I were to multiply that 72 lost teacher units, let's say by about $75,000 per unit, that's a loss of over $5 million that would be lost in fiscal year 2023. So again, the loss of students equate to a loss of teacher units, which equals a loss of dollars. Next slide, please. And here we see the amount of funds that the state will provide us, plus the amount of the match that the district will have to put up in order to participate in the state's foundation program. And again, we see $178.4 million, this total foundation program. Again, that also includes that $28 million that we'll have to put up to participate in the state's foundation program. As I stated earlier, we will receive about $150 million in state foundation program funds. We're also very, very thankful that the legislature did increase the amount of monies for student materials and supplies. So each of our teachers will be allocated $900 per teacher to purchase student materials and supplies, compared to $700 the prior fiscal year. Those various other funding areas, I think they match the same amount. Technology, $500 per unit. Library enhancement, $157. PD, $100 per unit. We also see textbooks at $75 per student. That's what we'll get. We'll get $75 per student for textbooks. Now, you all who have children in college, you all know that only that one textbook could easily cost over $100. We all know that. Well, we receive $75 per child. And that is to make sure that we are retaining up to 5 or 6 textbooks. So we see that those funds are somewhat short comparable to what the needs truly are. Next slide, please. These are the amounts of money that the state will actually remit to Montgomery Public Schools. We see the foundation program, as I stated, we'll receive about $150 million. We see what we received the prior year. We see school nurse program, about $1.5 million, compared up to $1.2 million. Now, most of these dollars, you see a little bit of increase in some of these dollars. That is because of that state mandated raise. Again, I want to say that because we lost students, if I multiply each of those lost units by about $75,000, then we lost about $5-point-something million for fiscal year 2023. Of course, we see transportation dollars, about $9.5 million in transportation funds. There was a little bit of increase in transportation dollars comparable to the last fiscal year. We have over 200 buses, about 170-something bus drivers that we have to pay the salaries and benefits, also the parts, repairs of those particular school buses to keep them operational. Fleet renewal are basically dollars that are utilized to purchase new school buses. So we receive $7,581 for every bus that is 10 years old or less. Again, fleet renewal dollars are funds that we receive to purchase new school buses. And again, we receive $7,581 for every bus that is 10 years old or less. The bus is over 10 years old, our loss. We would not receive those funds. Of course, we know that a school bus now costs over $90,000. That is one regular school bus. Many of our SPED buses, special ed buses, cost over $100,000 per bus. Again, we see our capital purchase dollars, $7.7 million. Again, we have to put up about $1.5 million of our own tax dollars, local tax dollars, in order to participate in the state's capital purchase program. And of course, we see the total amount of funds compared to the prior year. Next slide, please. And that is that match. We see the foundation match, again, about $28 million. The state capital purchase match, about $1.5 million. Next slide, please. And here we have a breakdown of our other general fund revenues. Again, we said the total federal revenues, most of that is the ROTC funds, that of course help us pay the salaries and benefits of some of our ROTC staff at our 5 traditional high schools. We see our local revenues, breakdown of our regular property taxes and business privilege tax and sales and gasoline tax. Our sales and gasoline tax did increase over the last year by about a couple of $1 million. So I don't know exactly how that is going to play out over the next several years, but I do know it's important that we budget somewhat conservatively because we really don't know what's going to happen with this particular economy. But we do see our various tax revenues. Again, out of that $62 million, still want to point out again, $28 million of that will be used to match so that we could participate in the state's foundation program. Next slide, please. Our district operates on basically eight expenditure types or expenditure functions. First, there's the instructional function. The instructional function basically speaks to the interaction between teacher and student. So any expenditure related to supplying that teacher with what he or she needs to educate those students will be deemed instructional services expenditures. The grand majority of those expenditures are the teacher's salaries and benefits. Instructional support services are basically those particular expenditures that pretty much support the supervision of the teachers. For example, an instructional support expenditure would be principals' salaries and benefits, assistant principals, counselors, librarians, reading coaches, all of those type individuals and the supplies and anything else they need to help support the teacher so that that teacher could provide the instruction that he or she needs for our students would be deemed instructional support services. Then, of course, we have our operation and maintenance services. These activities are concerned with keeping our physical buildings both clean, safe, and secure. So most of those expenditures would be basically our maintenance department. The salaries and benefits of the maintenance department, all of the maintenance supplies, custodial supplies, and all of the things needed to keep our buildings clean. Also, our security staff would be deemed operational expenditures, keeping our buildings also safe and secure. And that's what our wonderful security department does. They keep our buildings safe and secure. All of our utilities would be deemed operational expenditures. Of course, I'm sure all of us feel comfortable with this air conditioning running now. And of course, we have to pay for that. But the utility expenditures will be part of our operational expenditures. Logistics department also would be deemed operational expenditures. Auxiliary services expenditures are basically those expenditures of a subsidiary nature, and those expenditures will include transportation expenditures in our general fund, and it would include our child nutrition or food service expenditures in our special revenue fund. So again, auxiliary services, transportation expenditures in the general fund, child nutrition or food services in the special revenue fund. General administrative services, of course, we know what that is. Basically, the superintendent's office, finance office, human resources, all of those particular offices that are concerned with ensuring that policies are administered for the school district. Also include the board members, will be part of our general administrative expenditures. Capital outlay, again, the renovation of buildings, renovation of schools and buildings. Of course, we're looking very, very forward to receiving those property tax dollars so we can go out and let bonds so that we can start really doing a much better job of renovating our schools. We're looking very, very forward to that. Debt service fund, debt services, of course, the payment of long-term debt. Most of that will be paid off again in 2025. Other expenditures, activity programs that is not considered day school. Pre-K programs would be considered other expenditures. We have a pre-K over 20-something pre-K classrooms in our school district. Also, extended day or summer school will be deemed other expenditures. Those are, again, the expenditures that are not considered normal day schools for grades K through 6. That's why pre-K will be considered an other expenditure. Next slide, please. And there we see a breakdown of our projected expenditures for our general fund, which makes up, of course, our largest share of our expenditures. Instructional services and instructional support, we see that those two together make almost up about $183 million. That means our monies, the majority of our monies are going to the classroom or going towards the support of the classrooms. So it'll include all of the teachers, salaries and benefits, all the teacher supplies, anything related to that teacher being able to support that student or the interaction between the teacher and the student. Along with the instructional support, which is the principals, assistant principal, counselor, reading coaches, and all of those folk that assist the principals to ensure the teachers are comfortable in providing instruction to our students. Operation and maintenance, we see that at about $30.8 million. Of course, keeping our schools and our buildings safe, keeping them secure, and keeping them comfortable will be all related to operation and maintenance expenditures. Auxiliary expenditures, of course, as I stated, in the general fund, auxiliary expenditures are transportation, the busing of our students to and from school. And again, as I stated, we have over 200 buses and over 170 bus drivers. We are some bus drivers short. We are always recruiting for additional bus drivers. That was one of the reasons that we increased that salary by 13% the prior year. Of course, they'll receive an additional 4% this year, and we're going to continue to look at those various areas to ensure that we're staffed properly. General administrative, about $8.5 million. We know what that is. Other expenditures, of course, most of that is pre-K at about $3.8 million. Next slide, please. And there we see a breakdown of our total expenditures. Again, we notice that about 77 to 78% of our total instruction and instructional support expenditures are going towards assisting our students or the teaching and assisting of our teachers for our students. We see operation and maintenance make up about 13%. Do want to point out that general administrative expenditures make up about 3.63% of our total general fund expenditures. The state basically states that your administrative expenditures should not exceed 5%. So we're at less than 4%. In fact, I was looking at one of those other comparative school districts before we got here today, and one of those school districts is at 6% as far as administration. So with our district being at 3.6-something%, I think it shows that we want our dollars going to the classroom. Next slide, please. Here we see a recap of our fund balance. We see total revenues at about $240 million, expenditures at about $236 million. Excess of revenues over expenditures, of course, in private industry, that would be deemed a profit. But of course, it is deemed excess of revenues over expenditures in school systems or in a non-public environment. We're projecting to end fiscal year 2022 with about a $72 million fund balance. Of course, in 2022 will be our beginning balance for 2023. So that's why you see beginning balance for 2023 at $72.5 million. In total, we're projecting to end with about a $77 million fund balance. However, there are some recommendations that we want to make that would decrease this fund balance, but we believe these will be beneficial to our school district. I also want to point out that the state requires that all school districts retain what is called at least a 1-month fund balance. That means they want you to have at least 1/12 of your total general fund expenditures reserved as a just in case, so to speak. Just in case something bad happened and the state not able to do some things, then you got this $19 million at least to take care of some immediate needs. We see that our projected fund balance is over 3 times what the state requires. And so it just speaks to our board, superintendent, being very, very, not just frugal, but making sure that we're not wasting funds. And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure as much money go towards our students as possible. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the slide that kind of lists our recommendations as well. As you see, our projected ending fund balance, we're projecting at $77 million. Could we go back one, please? One slide. Okay, again, we see our projected ending fund balance, $77 million. Okay, the next slide, please. We see that $77 million. About $2 million of that fund balance is reserved for transportation. These are dollars that has to be spent for transportation, so we know we want to take that off the top. But you know, we're also recommending to complete the new central office up there on, is that Union Street? Yes. Okay, up on Union Street, about $6 million to finish that particular building. When we do that, we will be able to consolidate several of our central office buildings and properly sell those particular buildings. And those monies will go right back into the pot. It also will save millions of dollars in operational expenditures, because now we're not having to cut the grass. We're not going to have to be cleaning those buildings. And many times we'll probably even end up selling some of those buildings. So it will save quite a bit in operational expenditures. It also provide the superintendent and his staff an opportunity to pretty much supervise folk when most of the people are in one place. Instead of having to call someone in this building all the way across town to have them to come over, someone over the other part of town to have them to come over. So you got everybody consolidated in one building. It saves money. We're able to sell many of those surplus buildings, and plus we're saving on operational cost. We're also recommending for the first time in Montgomery that we set aside some monies called Capital Replacement Program. Too many times we have a HVAC system go out. There's a need for a new roof, need for new plumbing, and various other large capital expenditures. Sometimes vehicles. I know when we first got here, Chad, I think some of those vehicles was over 25 to 30 years old. And so we also talking about vehicle replacement. So what we're trying to do is get on some type of schedule that we're looking at our roofs every 3 to 5 years, see which roofs need to be replaced or need to be maintained. Which HVAC system need to be replaced or maintained. This vehicle now that's coming off of our schedule because it's 25 or 30 years old, is it time to replace that vehicle? And of course, so we wanted to start setting aside a portion of our fund balance to go towards a capital replacement program. Then we're recommending that we also set aside an additional anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million a year also to go towards this capital replacement program. And so Mr. Anderson, who's our Executive Director of Maintenance, he'll be putting together a schedule. I think he's already done it, put together a schedule of all of our roofs, the years of those roofs, the years of our HVAC system, the years of several of these various systems, and we'll know when we need to go in and replace, repair, or whatever, some of the other things that we need to do. And of course, businesses all over the country do this all of the time. And so I think it's really time that our school district start doing that. So you see, with those recommended allocations, that we are projecting a fund balance of about $66 million if we were to do those recommendations, take advantage of those recommendations, which I think would be cost-saving measures. Again, required fund balance at about $19.7 million. Even with that, we still will have over 3 months of our required state fund balance. So I still think we'll be in very, very good shape. We will still continue to manage our dollars the way we need to, but I think we really did do a job of planning on some of the unknowns, so to speak. Next slide, please. Next, we have our special revenue fund. Of course, again, the majority of these funds are our federal dollars. Again, as we stated, we have the ARP ESSER funds that will be expiring in 2024, and so we are cognizant of that, and we're already planning for that. But we see about $133 million projected in revenues, $131 million in expenditures, revenues over expenditures, about $700,000. Next slide, please. And there we see a makeup of our special revenue funds. Our federal funds are mainly our ARP ESSER funds, also Title I, which make up about $16 or $17 million. Title II, over about a couple of $1 million. Our special ed funds, over $6.7 to $7 million, over $7 million. So we got various other federal fund sources in there with those ESSER funds. Now, as I stated, the ESSER funds go away in 2024. So we are budgeting about $60-something million of ESSER funds for 2023. We will have remaining another $40 to $50 million remaining for 2024 in ESSER funds. So we're not budgeting all of the ESSER funds that we have because we know 2024 is coming. We're going to want to also have summer schools, summer programs, extended day, anything that we could do to help our students catch up from an instructional standpoint. We all know how hard COVID hit the educational community, so we have to do any and everything we possibly could to catch up or help our students take advantage of some of the opportunities that we will offer. Next slide, please. And there we have a breakdown of our special revenue funds allocation. We see about 97% of it is indeed our federal program funds. Next slide, please. There's that breakdown of those various federal fund sources comparable to the prior year. I'm not going to read all those out, but you can have a look at those. And of course, they're also in the book. Next slide, please. Okay, we see the remainder of our special revenue funds. We see the local, which includes our CMP daily sales. And these are items that the school may sell that is outside of the regular traditional CMP categories. As you know, all of our students receive a lunch at no cost, but we do offer certain items and certain salads and stuff at a cost, a small cost, that students can purchase if they choose. Our local school public funds at about $2.4 million. Again, as I stated, these funds are used to pretty much to benefit the entire school. These monies are raised at the school, such as athletics admissions would be local school funds, or the local school concessions, or local school fundraisers. All of those would be some of those local school funds. Next slide, please. And there we see our expenditures for our special revenue fund that is highlighted. And we see about $39 million and $29 million going towards instruction. So it's almost $60 million that is going towards instruction as it relates to our special revenue funds. Operation and maintenance, about $8.3 million. A lot of these federal dollars, the federal government is allowing us to use a lot of these ESSER funds to purchase PPE supplies. And so we want to make sure that our schools have an adequate supply of PPE supplies and cleanliness and that kind of thing. Usually you would not see that much operation and maintenance expenditures in a special revenue fund. Auxiliary services, about $17.8 million, as I stated. In special revenue, the auxiliary funds are basically our CNP, food service funds. So these monies are used to pay all of our food service workers, keeping the cafeteria clean, purchase of all the foods and those items concerning with the cafeteria. General administrative, about $5.6 million. Capital outlay, which is another category that you normally do not receive in a special revenue fund. But the federal government is allowing, or did allow, us to use some of our special revenue funds to go towards HVAC and flooring. And so we are allocating, or have allocated, in fact, we expended some last year as well, some of our ESSER funds towards flooring and roofing and HVAC. So that's what that is. The other expenditures are mainly summer school and extended day. It's about $17 million. So that, as we stated, we want to have as many extended day programs and summer programs as we possibly could for our students in an effort to help them catch up for the instruction that they've lost over the last year or so. Next slide, please. And there we see a breakdown of those particular expenditures. Next slide, please. And here we see our fund equity, or our fund balance, as it relates to our special revenue fund. We see excess of revenues over expenditures of about $674,000. The majority of that would be food service, child nutrition, and some local school funds. All of the other fund sources you are required to expend those fund sources, all besides the ESSER, because you can carry some of that over to 2024. We're projecting a beginning fund balance in our special revenue fund about $6.7 million. We plan to end the year with about $7.3, $7.4 million for fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. Next, our debt service fund. Of course, these funds are to pay long-term debt, whether it's bonds, whether it's a long-term note, but of course we do have to pay those long-term debt. Now what we do, the state allows us to transfer funds from our capital projects fund to our debt service fund to pay those debt. And the reason they allow that is because most of the time when you accumulate long-term debt, it is to build or renovate schools. So the capital projects fund, which are used to build and renovate schools, you're allowed to take some of those dollars to pay that long-term debt. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, we see our capital projects fund at about $83 million. About $15.8 million of that state capital purchase fund, and a portion of the bond issue that the state let back in 2021. I think we received about $33 million at the time. I think we have about $10 to $11 million of that remaining that we're utilizing to finish up some additional projects. About $1.4 million, that's basically the local match. As I stated, the district has to put up local match for both the foundation program and the state capital purchase program. So that $1.4 million is part of our local tax base that we have to put up to participate in the state capital purchase program. The $65.6 million of monies that we intend to maybe let some of our new property tax dollars for the building and renovating schools. I see Vogt is here. They are our capital program manager, and they are managing and building and renovating all of our schools, or most of our schools. Next slide, please. Of course, in our capital projects program, we're having a beginning balance of about $7.6 million. We believe we'll spend about $6.4 million beyond our total revenues. So we're projected to end fiscal year 2023 with about $1.2 million. So we're planning on really moving ahead, plowing ahead in the building and renovating of our schools. We want our kids as comfortable as possible and as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Expendable trust fund, basically our club funds, SGA club, science club, or robotics club, whatever the club is, those dollars are raised or fundraised or fees or whatever for students just for those particular clubs. I stated earlier that you have some special revenue local school funds that benefit the entire school, where these expendable trust fund monies are club funds that just benefit just those students in those particular clubs. So that's the difference between the public special revenue and the non-public expendable trust funds. Next slide, please. And there again, we see our total fiscal year 2023 budget projecting to end the year with about $77 million, but we're recommending to the board about $6 million of that be used to complete the central office, about $3 million towards a capital replacement program, $2 million towards transportation. So we're really looking at about $66, $67 million for fiscal year 2023. We see what we are projecting for special revenue, about $7.3 million. Capital projects, about $1.2 million, a total of about $86 million fund balance for fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. And Madam President, if we have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address.
Any questions? As always, you're so thorough. I don't know that we have questions. Oh, yes.
Probably more like a comment, Mr. Watts. And thank you for pointing out about the ad valorem, because I think that the message you convey to the public is that our ad valorem taxes are a consistent stream of revenue where we're allowed to do a lot for our students versus sale taxes, which fluctuate. And, you know, you kind of got to ebb and flow with that. So I just wanted to thank you for really pointing that out to the community. My second question probably would be between you and Dr. Brown. Kind of similar to my last question, but I'm comfortable with what the information I was provided. I do know that the ESSA funds will run out, and we've done a lot, put in a lot of things for our students to support them, and also on the professional development, you pointed out that we had summer enrichment as well as extended day. And I'm pretty sure a lot of these things are working, but it was all supported by ESSA for the most part.
Yes.
So to either of you and whoever wants to answer, because these things have been so impactful to our students and for our students, is there a plan in place? Because I know we're reserving some funding for various things, but is there a plan to put something in place for our schools? I know that there's Title I money, Title II money for on the human resource side, getting teachers and whatnot, but once that ESSER fund money runs out, what are we looking at to kind of put funding in those particular areas to
Yes.
continue that support?
Yes, I think it's very, very important that we look at all of our fund sources and really determine what return that we're receiving from the various programs that we have in place now. And there may be some situations where we may need to redirect some funds from one area to extended day, or from one area to some other area. And so that's one of the things that, that Dr. Brown has spoke about. He wants to know which programs are being used, how much they're being used, what's the return on those programs, and if they are not working, is this something that we need to move away from and put those monies or put those revenues in some other area? Dr. Brown, is that accurate?
I don't think I can answer it any better than that.
I don't think you can either.
Okay. Are there any questions on the budget from our audience tonight?
Thank you.
Did we have a question out there? Oh, okay. All right. Mr. Watts, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, we have our proposed certified classified support and supplemental salary schedules. Ms. Watkins.
I left all my junk up here. I'm sorry.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Brown, Ms. Will, and members of the board. You should have before you the proposed salary schedule for fiscal year 2023. It includes the proposed certified schedule, the proposed classified support salary schedule, and then supplemental salary schedule. The certified and classified or support salary schedule includes the state mandated 4% increase, as well as the certified includes the salary increases for certified staff based on years' experience. The supplemental salary schedules are those athletic and academic team salary schedules as well. Madam President.
Okay, were there any questions?
I did have one, and I actually called Dr. Brown. I was supposed to send you the screenshot and forgot, but I'll talk about it now. The two questions about the assistant superintendent, associate superintendent's acronym, abbreviated, excuse me. And then the other one, the assistant to the superintendent. Yeah, it's the same question.
Yeah, when we spoke before, when I see the term assistant to the superintendent, that tells me an administrative assistant. I could be wrong in terms of what's listed there. I haven't seen all those specifically, so I don't know if I have a good answer for you. But we'll certainly research that to figure out what the difference would be. An assistant superintendent, you're talking about somebody who's a cabinet level position that's supporting one of our departments.
Right, that's why I didn't know. I asked because I wanted to see what the job description was, because the pay kind of seemed the same, so I just didn't know. I wanted just some basically clarification.
Sure.
To see what it was.
We'll take a look at that.
But should I just wait still, or, because are we voting on this tonight, right?
We would be, yes.
Yeah. And it's no page number, so I can't, oh, no, I'm sorry. Page 9, at least on my iPad. And the other one,
Are you referring to page 28
and
99?
11, 9 and 11, well, okay, yes. Page 28 and page, on the document anyway, and what's this page? Page 7.
I have to be honest, Ms. Smith, I do not know what an assistant to the superintendent at that level would be. I can't speak to that. That's something that existed prior to my arrival, and I guess we just carried it over. That is not a position that we've hired to my knowledge, and have no intent to do so going forward.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Ms. Watkins, I think you flow over into this financial statement this month.
Yes, ma'am. You should have also before you the financial package for the month of July. The July financial package, as always, includes the explanation of financial data, which is from the CSFO. You also have a snapshot analysis, which provides an overview of the financials for the month of July, and we'll go into that a little bit. We have the monthly percentages. For the month of July, month of July is the 10th month of the fiscal year, so that's the beginning of the very last quarter of the fiscal year. So expenditures and revenues should be around the 83.33%. You also have a monthly and annual comparative statement of revenues and expenditures, and that report compares July 2022 with July of fiscal year 2021, as well as the year-to-date expenditures for July 2022 to the year-to-date expenditures for July of 2021. You have a statement of cash flow, which gives year-to-date inflows and outflows for the month of July. There are pie charts that are visuals of the inflows and the outflows of expenditures for the month of July. And then you have the F exhibits, which are the reports that generate when we upload the information to the State Department. If you turn to section 2 of your financial package, the snapshot analysis, you will see that our revenues year to date are $209,331,847, compared to our budget of $255,248,450. So our revenues are at about 82% of what we have budgeted. You'll see that our expenditures to date are $182,112,050 compared to the budgeted amount of $242,839,046. So our expenditures are at about 75% of our budget, which is good because it's under the 83.3%, which is where we project to be at the 10th month of the fiscal year. Also, you will note that at the bottom we do a comparison of the payroll for July of 2022 compared to July of 2021. You'll see that that is slightly higher. However, there was a 2% increase in this fiscal year. Also, you will see that we have a summarization of the local revenue. And at the bottom of the snapshot analysis, you will see a comparison of our general fund balance compared to last year, July of last year. Currently, our general fund balance is at about $89.4 million compared to $58.1 million or $58.2 million last year at the same time, an increase of about $31.3 million. Our required one-month fund balance is $20.2 million, so we have right at a little bit over 4-month fund balance, and our required one-month fund balance is $20.2 million.
I have one question on this slide.
Yes, ma'am.
Tell me why the county ad valorem tax is, I mean, I know we're doing great, we're spending less, we're right on target with our revenues, but I just noted that the county regular ad valorem tax seems to be down a considerable amount this month.
And like we usually say, that's a month by month. Those numbers fluctuate. Of course, we get the majority of those revenues in the early part of the fiscal year, like December to February. And then as we go throughout the remainder of the fiscal year, those amounts do fluctuate. So it's just a collection thing. There's nothing significant that we're aware of.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Watkins, Madam Chair, if I can ask a follow-up question to that, would it also be dependent on like maybe when people pay their taxes? Is that what create the fluctuation?
That could be, yes, ma'am. That's it.
That's it. Any other questions? It looks great. Again, we're spending less. We're collecting the same or more. It's very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Volkert update. Mr. Slater, I suppose.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening.
Chair Wheel, board members, Dr. Brown. I've got a PowerPoint again for our monthly update. If you would, next slide, please. Start current status on the projects. Highland Gardens, we've submitted the schematic designs to the DCM and moved on into the design development phase. We've got a little bit of issue with the property there. The property that we have to work with is a postage stamp size, and we've got to work with the city a little bit to be able to fit our new gym in there. Blunt Elementary, the school, the schematic designs have been submitted and moved into the design development phase there as well, as well as Halcyon. The Baldwin Middle project, which is at the Wilson site, the initial site visit has been conducted. The base drawings are being worked on. Carver Elementary, the schematic design has been submitted. I've got a copy of those further on into the presentation. The Carver High School, we're still massaging the shape of the building to try to get the most useful space out of the square footage to where we're not wasting any space. It'll be a one-story building just straight out this side of the school here. And the field house will be, it's coming along as well. Jeff Davis High, the schematic design has been submitted. It's, I've got some drawings of it further along in the presentation as well to where we can show you what it is looking like. South Lawn Middle, the design is progressing well. Flowers, I'm expecting to have the schematics submitted before the end of the month. And McMillan, the designs have been submitted to the state, and the survey has been completed. I've got a copy of those drawings in here too. Park Crossing, the design has got started, but just barely started. Surveyor's still working on getting the site lined up well. The Children's Center, the work there has been, the schematic design has been submitted to the state and should be coming back soon. At Lee, the land acquisition is still ongoing, but it's coming to a close soon. Highland Avenue Elementary School is scheduled to start within the next month or so. In Capitol Heights, we are working to get the architect started on that one as well. The survey is well underway. Floyd Middle School, the design is underway. And Crump and Dozier are scheduled to start in 2024, along with Vaughn Road, Wares Ferry, Brubaker, Danley, and Fitzpatrick. Morris, South Lawn, Bear, Chisholm, and Forest Avenue are also further along in the schedule. We'll move those up as other jobs are finishing, as the design teams can work on them as fast as they can. As well as Martin Luther King, the Davis Elementary, the Johnson School, Dalreda, Garrett, and Morning View Elementary. This is the site plan at the Macmillan Elementary School. The bottom of the sheet here is McInnes Road, and it is coming out right at the front entrance of the school. The current front entrance of the school is almost center of the page there, coming off the parking lot. Next slide, please. There's the floor plan of the gym, just blown up a little bit. The corridor coming off up to the top connects to the corridor that goes from the main entrance to the classroom wing to the left. We'll have restrooms according to code, just to meet the criteria, retractable electric bleachers in each of the gyms. Next slide, please. This is the Carver Elementary. Mobile Drive is on the right-hand side of the sheet. The proposed location of the new gymnasium is the yellow, the lighter yellow square that's up near the turnaround lane up there. And it'll be connecting close to the cafeteria and the auditorium. There'll be a corridor there. Next slide, please. This is the floor plan of the gym, just like the one at Macmillan. It's got retractable bleachers, the court, and the required restrooms and raised platform stage area. This is the Jeff Davis Fieldhouse project. To the far left is the lighter gray area there would be the new field house. The softball field and the baseball field have swapped locations to be able to get enough space in there to actually have a full field or nearly a full field. The existing conditions right now, home plate for the baseball field would be about where the softball and baseball field touch. And it was had it to where first baseline on it was less than 180 feet, which it needed to be closer to 300. So we were able to squeeze it in by encroaching a little bit on the existing parking lot. Okay, next slide. Here's the floor plan of the field house. The box or the rectangle toward the bottom there is the weight room. It's got plenty of wall space for the racks to be lined up on, and then also some nice open floor space in the middle for the other exercises they need. Coaches areas are on the left bottom corner. Locker rooms and showers are on the top, right above the weight room. And the other spaces are laundry and storage spaces, and also film rooms on the left. Next slide. This is a isometric view of, or isometric rendering of what the field house should be looking like. I'll have roll-up doors where they can come out of the field house weight room and work outside if they'd like. And a lot of plenty open air, or not open air, but natural light coming in toward the top. And our short-term look ahead is to continue with our schematic design on the first phases of the projects and move in to the design development and then on in the construction documents with the remainder of them. We need to complete our site acquisition and get the surveyors lined up on the next group of projects where they'll be ready when the designers are ready. We had subsurface soils are going on starting next week at several of the projects. Next slide. Our current professional services contracts are totaling just short of $21 million, and $10.5 million of that is going toward MBE DBE. The pie is pretty much split right down the middle, showing 50% on each side. Do we have any questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Slater.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the Southern Regional Education Board Amendment Number 1.
Good evening.
Good evening.
To our exuberant Superintendent, Dr. Brown, Madam President, and our distinguished board members. I bring you greetings on behalf of Curriculum and Instruction. I am Davita Johnson, Executive Director for 6th through 12th. One of our partners is SREB, which stands for Southern Region Educational Board. They are a national recognized board, and they have been working with the district. This is entering into their 3rd year. As I arrived last school year, when we conducted our needs assessment, and we came back and had a calibration meeting to determine hours that were served, how they supported school-based leadership, also the coaching and training that had transferable hours over for this school year. We also looked at the needs. At the current time, they were only supporting 12 of our secondary schools. When we conducted our instructional rounds, we saw the need for all of our schools to be supported as we move towards creating a systemic approach for teaching and learning across all of our schools and not having any disparities between magnet and traditional schools. So within that, I have a PowerPoint presentation. We went back and we looked at the comprehensive redesign. So the comprehensive redesign was to include and encompass all of our secondary schools. So again, we could be on the same page. So who's ever working the slide, I'm just gonna do like the pilots or the people that normally do the airports, and I'm just gonna move my hand forward when I want you to move. They can't see me? Okay. So SREB's 5 focus areas are engaging students through quality instruction. That is something that we want to occur in all of our schools. Aligning curricula with state readiness standards. Ensuring that students can explore careers and complete career pathways. We do know that all of our students would not enter into a 2 or 4 year institution post-secondary. So we want to make sure that we create clear pathways for them starting in middle school. And we've even had conversations around beginning those conversations at the elementary level. But most definitely beginning in middle schools, students should understand if they want to go to a 2 year or 4 year institution or whether or not they have an interest in a career path. Providing student supports that promotes readiness, promoting leadership for creating and supporting cultures of continuous improvement. We know part of our ASIP is continuous improvement. That's where you're looking at the holistic approach of everything that you do, all the facets of a school, whether that's strategic management, whether that's dealing with teaching and learning, whether that's looking at your climate and culture, whether that's looking at safety and security concerns. Next slide. Our aim, which Dr. Brown is saying, MPS is rising. So through our partnerships, one thing that we did as a curriculum team, we went back and had meetings to streamline some of the resources that we had. And so some of the things that we saw that were not utilized, some of the resources that we were purchasing, some of the partners that we had that was not giving us the proper return on investment, we streamlined those support systems to make sure that we utilized the ones that we felt was most in line with our goals for our district. Teaching and learning is at the forefront of everything that we do. So in working with middle schools and high schools, when you create those systemic approaches and processes and procedures, we start developing that common language with our partners so that as students transition from middle to high, as students transition outside of Montgomery, whether that's on a career path of going to an institution, We want to make sure that we set them up for success. Also in our high schools, we look at our college we look at our college and career readiness rate as well as our graduation rate, and in an effort to decrease the difference between the two, we want to make sure that we look at a comprehensive school improvement effort. So in doing that, when you start creating those systemic protocols from your middle schools as students transition to high school, then you develop that common language and you have better support systems in place. Next slide. Again, who are we targeting? We are targeting all middle schools, which includes McIntyre. We know that we've had conversations around wraparound services that need to occur with McIntyre. Even though that's an alternative setting, we want to make sure that when those students have to transition to and from McIntyre, that they still have support systems in place. We also want to make sure that we are promoting and increasing powerful literacy practices across all content areas. We know literacy is important, not just as ELA teachers, not just as social studies, science, but also in math as well. We also saw the need of making sure that we have students that are credentialing, whether that's through ACT work keys, whether that's making a certain score on the ACT, whether that's going into the military. So when we provide a plethora of opportunities for our students, we know that we create pipelines for them to be successful. Next slide. If you look at this chart, teaching and learning, you have all of our 18 schools. So you have your powerful mathematics practices, you have your powerful literacy practices. When they come in and support schools, they are not only just coming in and supporting school-based leadership, because we want to make sure that we build capacity with our leaders as well as within our schools. When you look at Hattie's teacher effectiveness and you look at what you yield from the best results, teacher efficacy is at the forefront of how you yield best practices and how you move the needle on student achievement. So when we tackle math, that encompasses us working with math and science, both on that side of the house. When you look at literacy practices, that encompasses it all, but that also encompasses specialists working with ELA and with social studies teachers, along with all of those others. And that encompasses leadership PD, coaching, professional development, and we know that when we go in and conduct needs assessments in schools, we are looking to tier support in schools. We are looking at tier support not only for leaders, but within our school buildings with teachers. We know that we have a lot of teachers that are novice teachers. We have some veteran teachers. We have a lot of teachers that are on emergency certification. So when you do that leg of work, sometimes you can't meet all of the needs of what we see as a concern. So when you have a partner that we can sit down and calibrate with, and we tier how that support is going to be rendered for all schools, then we will see an improvement on our test scores as well. Not only that, we're going to see sustainability with students being college or graduating college and career ready. Next slide. Making schools work, I don't know, I'm sure some of you have heard a lot of the schools speak to SREB, whether that was with support with specialists, whether that was with support with individual school-based leaders, but also during the summer, all of the curriculum team attended SREB conferences. So we had a lot of teachers from MPS that had to present. I also presented at the conference, and we had other leaders that presented. So when you are working with a partner, when you can calibrate and you can get on the same page, and we plan to move in the right direction, then we are better able to support our leaders, support our teachers. We are better able to calibrate with our curriculum tools and also with wraparound services. Next slide. District teaching and learning effort, you have different domains. When we plan, we look at what the input is, we look at what the activity is, we also look at what our outcome is and our outputs are, and we go back and we look at measurable tools. One thing about planning for continuous improvement, you also have to plan for how you're going to measure whether or not this was a true return on our investment. And when in doing that, we not only look at student data, but we also look at surveys. We also have conversations around best practices with leaders and with teachers. And then we get input from the curriculum and instructional team. And we use the data from our learning walks, from our instructional rounds, to help us make better informed decisions around what resources we need to help all schools. Next slide. At our middle school level, we have Baldwin, Brubaker, Capitol Heights, Carr, Dunbar, Floyd, Goodwin, McKee, and Southline. Next slide. For our high schools, we have Booker T. Washington, Brewtech, Carver High School, Jefferson Davis, Lamp, Lanier, McIntyre Comprehensive Academy, Park Crossing, and Robert E. Lee. Again, as I stated earlier, the goal is to provide equitable resources and services for all of our students. And in having that comprehensive redesign and looking at what was previous put into place and viewing our needs assessments, that's when we decided to move from the current contract, which is you all had already approved 3 years prior, entering into the third year, adding those 6 schools made the balance be different. So going from 525,000 to 638, if I quote that correctly, it's a little over 100 and some thousand once we went back in and calibrated the hours, the trainings, the support for teachers that were not being utilized. Adding those 6 schools, we only had to encompass $100 and some thousand change in that particular contract. One thing that Mr. Watts talked about was we know ESSA funds are not here forever. So in our planning with Dr. James with federal programs, Title IV has been paying for SREB. So when you look at funding sources, it's important that we look at funding sources that can be sustainable for continuous improvement, and that we're not doing a cash meal for right now to just get something that those funding sources may not be in place moving forward. But those funding sources are coming out of Title IV, and so it is up to Mr. Watts and federal programs how they compensate for the $130,000 or $118,000 difference. If you look at these results, we know that in order to be intentional, we always talk about data-driven practices, data-driven instruction. But when we look at instruction, and we're just looking at instruction with just numbers and not tying it to people, when we're looking at data-driven practices and we're not looking at a plethora of multiple resources, we just cannot look at summative data. We know that formative data exists. We know that distribution data exists when we're looking at our failure rates. We know that also data exists when we're looking at attendance. It's a holistic approach when we're trying to move the needle on student achievement. So the things get done only if the data we gather can inform and inspire those in a position to make a difference. We are in this position to make a difference, and so that's why we are making intentional decisions around data. Next slide. Are there any questions?
Thank you. That was a lot of good information, actually. And forgive me, I'm trying to take the mask off.
Okay.
Just a few questions. You mentioned that we have had, that we've had this for 3 years, and 2 of those years, I'm sure, was 1 year was probably COVID, and then
Yes, ma'am.
the other year was still a little interrupted, schools opening and closing. And I was looking in here, and I saw that it offers 4 days of on-site instructional coaching for 18 schools, Leadership Academy for principals and assistant principals 4 times a year, and planning and coaching sessions, and it's job embedded. Okay, all right. And I saw, and the reason I said that is it answered something I had in my head. But as we continue to move on on our agenda and looking at various things, I noticed that there was a job description that really was similar to this, that we're looking to fill with someone that would look at graduation, tracking, making sure students, are on a career path, checking attendance and all of that stuff. So the reason why I bring that up, it seems like we already have something embedded in our system where maybe we may not need a program because this is going to be put in place. And the other reason I brought up the time spent with the principals and the teachers is because I wanted to know in that time, and it was something that I may or may not have heard you say, so correct me if I'm wrong, is it being specifically customized to the needs of the actual school, what their needs are. You mentioned that ASIP. So is that something that they look at also, in addition to other data, to customize it? Because I do know this is a large company with, and a lot of times, and I'll just be honest, I'm the one that's a little on the fence about this one. We will have people to offer us things, and we don't get the bang for the buck. Another thing you mentioned was the data. Well, as a board member that has to make this decision, I would like to know the impact that it's having on our students, and also how is it helping with instruction, helping to grow our teachers to be better strategic teachers and all of that good stuff. I do realize that, there's definitely, probably, maybe, I don't know if we've utilized it enough to see the growth at this time because of all of the challenges that we've had, but I just think that right now, personally, that we seem like we're just looking at what Dr. Brown has implemented. I'm not certain, Dr. Brown, because
Sure,
I'm
I
seeing
can
what
respond.
you.
And if I could, Dr. Brown, I'm gonna answer your questions. First of all, if you were speaking to the Director of Innovation, is that the job that you're speaking to? That's a different leg work.
Yes.
So when you're looking at Director of Innovation, you're looking at some other needs that we spoke to, which is curtailing our fine arts department, making sure that the STEM approach that we're utilizing, those schools that we have expanded from with middle schools having robotics, now we're moving that to high schools. So when you're looking at Director of Innovation, you also encompassing our other partners, which is Ed Farm, which is our one-on-one with our middle schools. So that's a whole different leg work for that particular job description and what SRAB is providing. So another thing that you brought out is when you are having partners and at a district level, if you don't have the right support systems in place, it's just like when you are not having anybody to hold you accountable as a child. You're gonna do certain things. When you don't have anybody to hold you accountable as a leader, it's some things that's not gonna get rolled out with fidelity. So when you have partners and you know this partner brings the best data sources around what they've been able to do in districts compatible to our size, one being Birmingham and others around this district. So when you can speak from an experience standpoint, knowing what they bring to the table, but now you have leaders in place that you are able to hold instructional leaders accountable, because now the language is instructional leaders as principals. You are not sitting, taking a back seat. You are being in the forefront, making sure that the expectations, the district initiatives that we are rolling out, that you are overseeing that in your school. And those that can't rise to the occasions, we have alternative support systems in place for them. But when you can't move to the level of work that we need you to move to, we can't continue to allow people to practice with children. Not in the classroom, not as leaders in a school.
Well, you definitely spoke to me then, I get it.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, this is just to echo some of the concerns. I had some similar concerns as Ms. Watkins-Smith, but I'm going to tell you that report that you just gave for information, it squelched all problems that I had with what you had to say. You had me at data walls and formative assistance.
Yes, ma'am.
The fact that you have self-assessed, you did some weeding out, you saw what was being used, what was not being used, and I think what really sold me is when we look for the extra money that's being asked for, we're adding schools, and we're doing more training. So hopefully, with all this, we are going to get the bang for the buck. But it sounds like you're doing your homework, and you're trying to make certain that we are spending our money wisely. I thank you for that very detailed report.
Yes, ma'am. And when we went back and looked at all of our resources, we had about 30 different resources that we were spending over $5 million on. Some had never been.
Ms. Johnson, let me interrupt you real
Okay,
quick.
I'm sorry.
We've already moved $1.1 million off the books on contracts that were not being impactful based on information we were gathering so that we could align our district and provide leaders and teachers with the type of capacity support they need in order to improve. We also had a number of people throughout our district who were having a whole lot of balls in the air and doing numbers of different things and not being able to do many of them well. So we're trying to streamline and align all the things we do across the district so that as a team, we're moving in the right direction in providing the types of supports we need all across the entire board. So this particular contract allows us to do some of that stuff, and we're talking about an increase of about $125,000, which is a drop in the bucket, considering we've already moved off $1.1 million in the last 3 weeks.
Well, you know, I'm pleased about that. I think we've all kind of shared some concerns about just the programs that were out there. And was just wondering, you know, how effective are they? So
that's exactly what
and we did this as a team effort. We sat down with technology because they ran those data reports to see what was currently being utilized with some of those resources. We also sat around with district leads that were in the room at the time, as well as the curriculum and instruction department, with federal programs and with Mr. White. So all of these conversations have been had with multiple people to make sure that we are being good stewards of our finances and resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very important. I'm glad to see that we have equity among all of the schools, doing the same thing for every school, and that's what's the most important thing. Thank you for that report.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions?
I have a comment, and it's going to sound negative, and I don't mean it to sound negative. I think what you've done is tremendous, great. I echo exactly what both of these ladies have said. But I think I like to look at the big picture, and I'm looking at the town hall meetings that we've had so far, which are 2. And when you listen to the teachers speak, when you listen to people like Katie Brown speak, when you listen to Vicki Holloway speak, I think you have to look to what they're really saying, because I tie this into the last meeting that we had. You still have people in spots that are coming across to the public as they don't care. You know, you have too many. I just would think you could take the money that we're saving on our programs, and then this is not putting down, and add a counselor, add somebody that's going to do with dual enrollment, and then you wouldn't.
That's actually what we're doing.
Okay.
The position we've spoken about a little bit earlier, the Director of Strategy and Innovation, will be over dual enrollment, AP, IB, and any other of the specialty type programs we're trying to put in place. So with those exactly the types of things we're doing.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Hill Johnson, that was tremendous. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Dr. Nettles, Superintendent's evaluation process.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Dr. Brown, Madam Chair, board members. What we want to do today is talk briefly about the process for the superintendent's evaluation. There is a PowerPoint attached to that conversation, but you all also have the PowerPoint and the presentation, so I'm going to continue to move forward. Next slide, please.
The purpose of the superintendent's evaluation is to assess the performance and serve as a tool to develop individual growth, and also to continue to promote valuable relationships, not only with the board, but the community, the staff, the stakeholders. And so what we want to be reminded of is that any school district's superintendent's evaluation is the responsibility of the Board of Education, and that's Alabama State Department of Education legislation. So it is our responsibility to develop and administer and monitor and participate in a superintendent's evaluation process. Next slide, please. If you recall, the State Department over the last several years has developed a process of evaluation that includes a self-assessment, an ability to create a professional learning plan, and an ability to provide evidence for that. And that process is based on standards. And we didn't create a process that was random. We created a process based in standards. So you see the American Association of School Administrators standards, the Alabama Standards for Instructional Leaders, and we also crosswalked our intent with the Cognia performance standards. And if you recall, Advanced Ed, when we started this process, is now Cognia. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the pieces that I just spoke about. The self-assessment, which is really an opportunity for the superintendent to determine where there are opportunities for growth. Then there's the professional learning plan, and that professional learning plan will be developed around the learning objectives and the self-assessment, and then the presentation of the summary evidence, and that will be as a result of the PLP, the professional learning plan. Next slide, please. You see the timeline. The September-October area, and we selected September. The superintendent, we will present this information to you, and the superintendent will complete the self-assessment and collaboratively develop the objectives with the senior leadership team in collaboration and conversation with the board. The board will receive and approve the superintendent's professional learning plan. The superintendent will complete the activities, and that goes on from October of 2022 to April of 2023, and then in May, the superintendent will present those results. So you'll see me again in April-ish, so that we can talk about what that collection of data process will look like for you all. But along the course of the year, the superintendent will be collecting evidence, providing you with those Friday reports so that you have an opportunity to see where he is. And so we have a dual process going on. You're seeing where he is consistently, but that's also his evidence. The superintendent's evaluation process for this superintendent is an annual process. And you know what we do is we look through the contract and make some determinations about what the evaluation process timeline will look like. So the timeline for, it's annual, so 2022-23, we're going to close out. 23-24 we'll close out, and then 24-25 we'll proceed based on the terms of the current contract. Everybody still with me? All right, so next slide. So we're talking about the process and the timeline now. Dr. Brown will work through his self-assessment and the areas of concern. And when he looks at that self-assessment, he's not only looking at the document, he's looking at his 100-day plan. He's looking at all of the evidence that he has gathered since he's started with us. And he will also have reflective conversation with you all as a board. And then that will help determine the direction that he's going to go in. And then he'll complete the professional learning plan after discussions with the senior leadership team. That professional learning plan will be brought back to the board in October, and then we'll collect that data as stated in that next slide. Next slide, please, and next slide, please. So in April, again, I'll be back. Dr. Braun will provide you with that evidence, and then we will have a conversation about that process. Questions, problems, or concerns? What I don't want to do today is talk about what the collection process is going to be in April, because that's a little longer conversation, but I wanted you to see the basics so that we could get started again. It's like the same kind of overview we do for principals at the beginning of the year when they begin the evaluation process. Everybody still with me? All right. Flip one more page. You see the 8 standards that are implemented within the evaluation process. You have Standard 1, Leadership and District Culture. Standard 2, Policy and Governance. 3, Communication and Community Relations. Organizational Management, Financial Management. Do I need to read the rest of them? We're all good. We're all good. All right, so flip one more place to the scoring. Next slide, please. I always, whenever we talk about the evaluation process, I always want to remind you of the scoring rubric, because that needs to be in your head along the process, because we're talking about 5 to 1, but we're also talking about far exceeding expectations, consistent high levels of performance, consistent fulfillment, does not meet, consistently below expectations. And the reason I want to point this out is sometimes we need to be reminded that this process is objective. It's about the evidence you see, the progress we've made, and it doesn't have anything to do with our feelings. So we always want to make sure that we revert back to the scoring process, because the question is, was the job done that was requested? Did we meet those expectations? And did we exceed those expectations? So that becomes the conversation in this scoring rubric. Questions, problems, or concerns? Again. All right, and if you would go to flip, one more slide, please. One more. Just as a reminder, this is what the evaluation matrix will look like. And it is still paper pencil. I think we may be at a point where we can make it electronic. I will be talking with the superintendent about that as well. But I wanted you to see what the rubrics look like, because for each standard, there are several indicators. And so when you received your hard copy of the evaluation instrument itself, you were able to see the extended version of what I'm talking about in summary, but you actually have all of the indicators and standards that go along with this process. So when you're looking at the standards, you're also looking at the indicators, because they build towards that large category. Each indicator can stand on its own and then create a summary score or a summary conversation. We don't want to get stuck on one indicator that you feel didn't happen, and therefore you throw the whole standard out. But if you think about it, even in a cake, there are different ingredients in a cake. And if you don't have them all, you don't get the cake you want, but it doesn't mean you didn't get a cake. I've done it. Are we good? Are there any questions about the evaluation process and the expectations at this point? Because at this point, you have the process. Dr. Brown will begin his self-assessment. We will bring it back to you. Then we'll bring the PLP back to you in October, and then he will provide you with evidence along the way through April. In April, I'll be back to talk about your process for reviewing the data again, and then having access to the instrument. And then once you evaluate that information, provide those scores to me in whatever format we determine, then we'll be able to present those final scores for review and discussion in May-ish.
Okay. Are we all good? Anybody got a question for Dr. Nettles? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Jamie Wilson's got a couple of items to discuss with us.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Brown. I'm going to go a little bit out of order. Mr. Mitchell is going to come and talk about some of those contracts. I'm first going to talk about the Kids First contract, where we're working with Kids First. We are right now in our 1.5 year of the Ability Grant. The Ability Grant was awarded by the state to support our schools that have been identified by the state, which would be on watch. That would be Goodwin, Capitol Heights, and Southline. We've also this year looking into our feeder schools so that we make sure that our instructional strategies are aligned and that we're providing support for students in the elementary schools that feed into our middle schools, which would include Chisholm, Southline Elementary, and Highland Gardens, thank you. So this contract allows us to provide professional development, district-wide coaching. The grant allows us to have many hours of coaching, and the expectation is that we are sustaining it through our professional development of our teachers and our coaches. So this grant allows for us to contract with Kids First, who is also supporting other schools who are granted the ability grant, and allows us to continue our professional development in not only the 3 middle schools, but our feeder schools.
Okay, questions?
I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Mitchell.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair Will, board members, Dr. Brown. I want to receive as information for the approval of the agreement with Renaissance. Renaissance is embedded in supporting the Literacy Act, as well as the Numeracy Act in advance. The components of Renaissance include Accelerated Reader, Freckle, ELA, Math, and Science and Social Studies, Mayan, and STAR 360. The goal is to, on an interval, continuous basis, to evaluate where we are ahead of time. The funding source is ESSER 3, and it's a 1-year contract. Are there any questions? Okay. Second item, presenting receive as information for the approval of an agreement with MPs. MPs is a way for us to engage with a vocabulary program that has the ability to build word consciousness. It's for grades 6-12, because many times we want to make sure that it not only exists in early grades, but the continuation in grades 6 through 12. Again, the funding source is ESSER 3. Are there any questions?
Okay. I see none.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Brown, you're going to talk about ATB?
This is an easy one. Thank you so much, President Will, board members. Given the litigious nature of what happens in schools across the entire country, it's important that we have our liability coverage taken care of. This is a contract with for our ATB Automobile Fund Agreement to make sure that that liability insurance is in place. This is with the Alabama Trusts for Boards of Education, and I believe this is the 7th year of this liability coverage. This takes care of us for the entire year in those venues.
Anybody got a question? Okay, moving on to Katrina Jackson.
Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Brown. I'm Katrina Jackson, Director of Special Education, and you have before you a price quote for $85,000 for direct and indirect speech language therapy services to offset the shortage that we have with our current speech language pathologist. It's 1,000 hours of direct and indirect speech services that will be provided virtually to our students. We are currently short 2 SLPs, so that's impacting a little over 100 students who are going without services without these. Do you have any questions?
No? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Williamson?
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Brown. I am bringing to you quotes that we use with Imagine Learning, which was previously Edgenuity. We use them to support 3 different programs within student services. Homebound, for our children who receive homebound services when it is more of a risk to send a person because of a child's specific medical needs. We have Edgenuity that allows that child to continue instructional services. We also use Edgenuity in McIntyre for our overaged academies, and we use Edgenuity to levelize services that we provide across our middle schools for advanced courses to meet our gifted population needs. We pay for all of these services through a grant that we write from High Hopes. Any questions?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gillis.
Madam Chair, board members, and Dr. Brown, you have a quote for Imagine Learning, formerly known as Edgenuity, and this is for 2 teaching units. We want to use the rotating seats rather than just a regular teacher during the year. The fund source for Capitol Heights will be the foundation unit, so that's money that is guaranteed to us by the state. And Park Crossing is wanting to add 1 additional math teacher, and she will use her ESSER funds for that. Any questions?
Nope.
I think I'm up again.
Yes, you have several.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just keep it rolling until I'm finished. All right, so what we were talking about a few minutes ago are the new job descriptions that we're posing before the board. And I won't read these to you, but I will explain some of the things that I think needs to be highlighted in the fund source for each of those. The first one is the Director of Intervention and Strategic Supports. This one is going to be the person who's going to actually monitor the academic process, accountability interventionist across the district. This person is going to really help with our math education. You know, our math scores are down across the district, and we want to make sure that we can try to pull those things up. We don't want to, this person is going to provide some innovative strategies for math instruction. They're going to also monitor our virtual school. They're going to work with novice math teachers, and you know, because we have a teaching shortage, we have a lot of novice math teachers. So the instruction will not be as strong as we don't have someone to help provide for that. Also, this person is going to help with any math teacher who's on an alternative certification and some of the other areas as well. We also want to do some exemplary things in math, like have math nights and different math functions for the entire district, and that person will do that. We also have STEM schools, and we also want to have more STEM schools. So this person will also be responsible for those. The fund source for this one will be the general fund. This person will report to the Chief Academic Office, so this person will also be located in curriculum and instruction. Any questions about that one?
No, ma'am.
Okay. The next one is for the position of the Director of Strategy and Innovation. Formerly, this was an educational specialist position, and that person dealt with all of the magnet issues. They're going to deal with IB and any of those innovative programs that the district is going to embark upon. The fund source will be the general fund. This is being presented to you because it's a difference of being an educational specialist position, now will become a director's position. So pretty much the same duties, but at a director's pay, simply because we're adding more programs and we're trying to expand across the district for IB and some of the other innovative things that we'd like to have. Any questions about that one?
No, ma'am.
The next one is one that came out of a lot of different things. If you look at our graduation rate, it's not as strong as we would like for it to be as a district, but graduation rates across the nation is something that's being constantly looked at. Also, in the last town hall meeting, this is one of the things that came out of the town hall meeting, as I think Dr. Keith brought up. Some of those things that came up are embedded in these job descriptions. This one is the graduation tracking system and college and career readiness specialist. This is going to be the person who's going to help with dual enrollment. They're going to still help with some of those school-based graduation things, but they're going to deal with it on a district level, and so we can have a better pulse on what's going on outside of the district at the central office level, and so we can really taper down to what's going on in the schools. And then we can get really good data and make sure that we're getting the bang for our buck with the graduation coaches and all of the other different departments that fall underneath there. So this one really did come out of listening to what was happening and what the people are asking at the town hall meeting. Any questions about that one? All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Glad y'all did that.
All right, and then the last one is the District Literacy Educational Specialist for grades K through 5. You know that not only is math a weak area, we also have the Literacy Act that requires so much of our teachers. And we need for someone to have a pulse on that as well. In order for us to move as a district, we've got to know where we are. And we've got to be able to get good data so that good data can be brought to you so you can hear it and you can make good decisions. We want this to be a very focused effort. We have ARI staff across the district and schools, but we need someone to make sure that they're focused, that their attention is right where it should be, and that they're really focusing on English language arts and making sure that our reading scores and our ELA scores go up constantly. This one will be funded from federal monies as well as the general fund. Questions about that one?
No questions. Thank you, Ms. Gillis.
You're welcome.
I want to just make one comment. When y'all look for that dual enrollment, all I want to point out is whoever you hire for that, as far as marketing, there is, like what Dr. Brown said, you know, he came from Ohio where, you know, you had 20 to 30, maybe even more that walked across that stage also with an associate's. Absolutely. And what I don't think our parents know here in Montgomery is that MPS is footing the bill as long as they have a 3.0 average. And if we get the connection between the counselors and that, look at our numbers, guys. From the time I've been on here, we went from 32,000 to 25. When these parents realize and these kids realize it is an incentive, and we will bring more people to this town because they're going to go, look what they're doing for our kids. It's a reason to come here. It's just huge.
That's exactly why we're doing it.
Okay.
We all agree.
We have a pretty ambitious goal to have over 100 kids within the next 5. I would like to see yearly. Within the next 5 years, I have over 100 kids walking across the stage with an associate's degree in hand.
Trust me, I'm at a private school during the mornings at least till 12:30. And they don't, our school can't afford to pay for those kids, and they're mostly poverty kids. And I could probably get fired, but I don't make hardly any money there, and I'm constantly pushing these kids to come back to Montgomery Public School System.
And I agree with you. I want that too, but we have to demonstrate to them that we're building that capacity, and this is why all this work's being done right now. I'm proud of what we've done in the past 8 weeks to even put these things in place so we can get them rolled out.
It's awesome.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Anderson, facilities update.
Good evening, Dr. Brown, President Wheel, Vice President Mitchell, and members of the board. If you'll look at your spreadsheet and follow along with me, looking at the different projects you've heard from the Volcker Capital Project. The next on their list is the central office consolidation. Most of the three-story building on the west side of Union Street is nearing completion on the sheetrock. A lot of the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, close to 90% on all 3 floors is complete. They're starting to make those connections from the top to the bottom, so the units that you see on top of the building there will be connected down into the building with piping and plumbing so that those air conditioners can be fired up. Your roof is mainly complete. They'll put some facing around the side of it that you'll see from there, and a good bit of your windows and window frames are placed in there. So we're moving along very well there. We're ahead of schedule in that building. On the other side of the street, the cafeteria, or you might call it the burn side, where the building that burned down was on the east side of Union Street. We've gotten that moving in the right direction. We had to get the curbs in for the new kitchen hood that will be in the test kitchen. Those have come in, so the roofing will start on that building here in the next week or two. They poured Monday the flooring for the top floor to get that stabilized in the right position. Once the roof is on, again, they'll start doing the framing and all inside of the building on the second floor as soon as that roof is starting to be in process, and then immediately after that, they'll be following along with the sheetrock. The windows are being put in place down on the bottom. Want to make sure it's secure before we start really doing a good chunk of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. The Brubaker Dozier mansard roof, again, that mansard roof is what you see on those, on the front, the shingle part there. The shingle part is no problem. The metal has been the issue in getting that in. A good bit of the metal is in over at Dozier. We're still waiting on some of the metal over at Brubaker, of the Brubaker complex, that trims the piece, that trims the shingle roof. And then, of course, the front entrances, we're waiting on that metal to come in and finish that. And once it comes in, it'll be completed very quickly. BTW construction update. My report here was turned in a little early. I got a report on Friday that we're in 90% in the dry on the cafeteria, and they're working on the gymnasium as we speak. So they're starting the sheetrock work on the cafeteria. There's not a great deal of sheetrock work in that area. A good bit of the sheetrock work is done in the Magnet Arts side of the building, and then they're starting the site work on the north side of that building as we clean up that rough construction and get those that machinery out of there. They plan to just sweep from the north side down to the south and doing the site work for that project. The Goodwin HVAC and Brewtech HVAC, again, we're waiting on materials for that. We're still set for a November start. I've been working with the principals on those buildings, and they're gearing up and getting ready for that, as ready as we can be. It's going to be some pain in the process, as I like to say, and getting these buildings up to date. It's just too big of a project to try to take on just for a summer, and it will stretch for some time. Principals have been great to work with, and we're going to try to help and assist them as any way we can. The logistics, roof, and renovation, again, we've held the pre-construction meeting on that. They're starting some of the inside work and repairing the trusses and all there, and we're going to be sealing up the backside where the roll-up doors were all the way around the building. We don't utilize those doors anymore. They're a break-in hazard, so we're going to be sealing those up. And again, they're waiting on the roofing material, but there's plenty of work, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, and the structural work on the inside before beginning that roof project. The Katoma cafeteria and roof repair, we're working on the drop ceiling and the lighting in there, and also waiting for the fire alarm to be reconnected. And with that, when you shut down a fire alarm, when you take away the electricity to that and you recharge it, you have to recommission that fire alarm. The Bellingrath water damage, we did not have a lot of casework damaged in that, mainly the room where the fire was set, and that was coming in this week to be placed on or replaced. The J.D. Danley roof replacement, all materials on site. We're just waiting on the pre-construction conference for that, and we'll begin that immediately as soon as we get that pre-construction go ahead.
Any questions?
I have a question. Could you remind us of the timing on the construction for BTW?
We're still set and trying to be in that building by January, and we're still on that schedule, and we ask each OAC meeting.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
I'm going to make an executive decision here, and as we close this meeting out, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we will be back here at 6:55. This meeting is, work session is adjourned. We get an approval of this agenda, please?
Madam President, Madam President, I move that we approve the agenda.
All in favor with a show of hands? Okay. And, as you know, I like to start our meetings with some good news from around the district. There's always good news. First off, we want to congratulate the McKee Middle School Band and Band Director Jamie Phillips for receiving a grant worth more than $36,000 from the Mr. Hollins Opus Foundation. This grant will allow schools to buy 4 euphoniums, 2 tubas, 5 flutes, 8 trumpets, and 5 snare drum and bell kits. This will be a welcome boost to the great band program at McKee, and I think it deserves a round of applause. Next, we have some fun news at Pentlala Elementary, which is about to celebrate its 100th anniversary. The school will hold a community celebration on September 25th from 2 to 4 to mark a century as part of the Pentlala Hope Hole community. So if you have a chance, come out to the celebration. I'd like to mention a student who has received a very impressive offer. Lauren Rudolph, a BTW dance student, auditioned and was accepted to attend the Dance Theater of Harlem's Summer Intensive on a full merit scholarship. After completing the intensive in Harlem, New York, Lauren received an offer to train this year as a future company dancer. This is exciting news and also deserves a round of applause. I want to recognize the students who volunteered this past weekend to help spruce up some of the schools with painting and other beautification efforts. I think many students helped with this, but I particularly want to recognize the Health Occupation Students of America from Jeff Davis, who took part in cleanup efforts at Brubaker Primary. And this was part of the Hands-On River Region's 9/11 weekend of service. And finally, congratulations to the Lamp High students who received awards from the College Board's National Recognition Program. The students earned the awards through academic achievements at school and their performance at a variety of tests. A total of 13 Lamp students won the African American Recognition Award. The winners are Aaron Robinson, Kennedy Hawkins, Morgan Washington, Doris Davis, Jaslyn Samples, Logan Boone, Danielle Williams, Latalia Bryant, Ethan Ferrier, Lauren Tubbs, Nafisatu Nadoya, Malia McKinney, and Cindy McCain. And 2 won the Hispanic Recognition Award. The winners of that award are Augustin Lemuse and Brandon Henriquez. And I think this deserves a round of applause also. We're proud of all of our students, and when they excel and exceed, we certainly want to celebrate with them. Next, Jay Jones, we have some recognitions tonight.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Brown, and board members. We indeed have some special recognitions tonight, and it is on behalf of the Alabama Association of School Boards. So that means that all of you. I am bringing you all certificates for completion of your Governance Improvement Act during the 2021-2022 academic school year. And I have a bit of an assignment for you all. But first, let me share who completed this. We have Miss Jana Bailey, and I'll bring the certificates up to you because again, I have an assignment for you. Miss Cassandra Brown, Dr. Coleman, Brenda Coleman, Dr. Lisa Keith, Mrs. Claudia Mitchell, Mrs. Erica Smith, and Mrs. Claire Will. Now, I would like for everyone to give you all a round of applause for completing this training. Now, here's the fun part. Board members, here's your homework. Imagine me being a teacher. How about that? So here's your homework. You're going to take your certificate and take a selfie, and you have a hashtag that you must upload to Facebook and Twitter. If you don't have a Twitter account, come see me later. Dr. Keith, we'll talk. We'll talk. So you're going to take a picture. You're going to take a picture with your certificate, and you'll use the hashtag #GovAtCompliant. And I'll send you all of this information, and what we'll do, we'll reshare it. But we're really proud of you all, and we want to thank you for the work that you do for our students here at Montgomery Public Schools. So thank you so much. And Madam President, I have one more recognition that I would like to share. This weekend, our students from Carver High School, the Culinary Arts Department, they assisted the folks with the Children's Literacy and Policy Fair over at the Multiplex Center. So yeah, that deserves a round of applause. They did a wonderful job manning all the booths and giving prizes. I even had a good time playing bingo. May I say I won twice. So I did share my prizes, however. So we do want to thank those students. Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Next we have scheduled public comments, and let me read the rules. Public comments requests must be made in advance in writing to the superintendent's office by 4:30 on the Tuesday preceding the meeting date. Requests must have specified the nature of the business to be taken up with the board and the name of the person who will address the board to be added to the agenda. Communications must be respectful. Discussing specific student or employee matters will not be allowed. Individuals who have concerns that are inappropriate to be solved in this venue are welcome to seek a problem-solving meeting with the superintendent. Immediate feedback by the board may not be provided. However, you may be contacted for follow-up by the superintendent or his designee. Public comments may not exceed 3 minutes. The board chairman has full authority to terminate the remarks of any person whose comments contain personal attacks, exceed the time limit, or are otherwise inappropriate. A speaker may be considered disruptive who continues to speak when their allotted time has ended, when asked to stop speaking by the board chairman, or is otherwise inappropriate. If a person fails to comply when asked to terminate comments, he or she will be escorted to their seat, out of the auditorium, and/or off of MPS property, depending on the level of disruption. And we have several people who are signed up for tonight. We'll start with Ms. Crystal Russell on speech and debate in middle schools.
Good evening, Dr. Brown, Madam President, and members of the board. My name is Crystal Russell Aite. I'm the founder of Destiny Driven Incorporated, and I am a 12-year educator. I have used academic debate as a best practice in my classroom. I have started the Montgomery Area Debate League here in Montgomery, and I've trained hundreds of children on how to use debate. As an English teacher, I wanted my children to learn how to communicate effectively, and that is both verbally and in written language, and debate does all of those things. Debate increases literacy, critical thinking, writing, research, and social awareness. Today I'm here to propose a 12-session pilot with MPS where we will develop competitive debate teams in Montgomery and also train teachers on how to use the pedagogy of academic debate in their classrooms. We have received the endorsement of our mayor, City Councilwoman Johnson, and some of our board members and parents, but most importantly, we have changed lives of students. Students have become greater public speakers and have gained more confidence, and to speak to that, we have one of our students just to tell you about the benefits of debate from her perspective.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Summer Lee. I'm a part of the Montgomery Youth Policy Council and Destiny Driven. I've been a part of Destiny Driven for 2 years. What has debate done for me? Debate has allowed me to become more open and more expressive with my ideas and thoughts. Debate has even allowed me to do what I'm doing now, speaking in front of an auditorium of people. 2 years ago, I was even scared to speak in front of my classmates. Debate has really allowed me to become a better person. Thank you.
So I want to present to you a proposal that contains endorsement letters, our scopes and sequence, our curriculum map, and our testimonials. As educators, we know that it's imperative that we empower young people to both think critically, but also to communicate effectively. I know this works, it has worked, and I would like to make it work for the students in Montgomery Public Schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Sonia Mills McCall, concerned alumni and citizens of Lanier High School. Is Ms. McCall here? Is Representative Penny McClammy here tonight? Okay, is Ms. Shalonda Fuller here? Shalonda Fuller?
Right in the back.
Okay. The podium is yours.
How y'all doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you all so much for receiving me on this evening. Again, my name is Shalonda Fuller. I stand as a parent. I am a member of the PTSA board at Sydney, the prestigious Sydney Lanier High School. And I have alumni at Sydney Lanier. I have 3 daughters, and my son is a 12th grader at Sydney Lanier. And I wanted to at least ask to revisit the merger of Sydney Lanier and Carter. But I have only 2 questions, and I have, 3 questions and 1 comment. How much is it going to cost to rebuild Lee High School? What will it cost to rebuild Lanier? And will Lanier be turned into a charter school? And anyone can answer those questions. Ma'am?
You know, this will not be answered in this venue tonight.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Okay. And with the number 9, with the consider for approval, will that be revisited?
I'll tell you what, let's get some information from you and we'll have a conversation about it. Can we do that offline?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I want to say that I think your questions are good questions. I just think you would need to understand the whole big picture. I don't understand it, but I think we all appreciate, and that your questions, they're very valid, so. And while I'm speaking, I do want to say something about the lady that spoke about the speech. I'm so glad you got up and spoke about that. I'm a big advocate, and you're right, what it does for these kids, especially if you start in middle school. I used to teach 7th grade years ago, but sometimes my 7th graders are better than my seniors. And I'm just so elated to see somebody in the community. And when you see a little girl get up there and say, hey, I used to not do this, that's exactly why you do debate. So thank you for getting up.
And the reason why I wanted to come to this meeting, and I've been going,
She is.
I have been calling Lanier. I've been calling the principal and everyone. And my daughters, I have 3 daughters that are alumni. My son is in the 12th grade. I'm basketball mom, football mom, and my grandson wants to go to Lanier. And I don't know, I'm just here, you know? I just wanted to make sure that I can make my plea.
Your voice is heard, Ms. Fuller, but I'll tell you what, if Jade will get your information, one of us will be in touch and have a long conversation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very
Yes,
much.
ma'am. Thank you. Y'all have a blessed day.
You too.
You too. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.
Dr. Brown, we have a consent agenda?
We have a consent agenda with a number of different items there to discuss items, to vote upon items A through R for your consideration.
Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as recommended or as moved by Dr. Brown for items A through R.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? That's unanimous. Dr. Brown?
I'd like to offer for the board's consideration the approval of the personnel report certified personnel.
Do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move that we approve the personnel report certified.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, I need to pull item number 40 from that list.
Okay. Any other discussion? Do we need to change the motion to approve it with the withdrawal of item number 40?
Yes.
Do we have such a motion?
I move that we accept the personnel report certified with approved changes.
I second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Dr. Brown?
I recommend approval of the personnel report, classified personnel.
Madam Chair, excuse me, I move that we approve the superintendent's recommendation to approve personnel report, classified personnel.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? Thank you. Unanimous. Dr. Brown?
And finally, I recommend the approval of the personnel report teams.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve personnel report teams.
Any discussion? All in favor with a show of hands? And that is unanimous. Our next meeting is October 11th at 5 o'clock right here at Carver, followed immediately with the work session will be followed by a board meeting. And with that, we are adjourned.